welcome to this week's edition of SouthCoast EndZone. I'm Tim Weisberg.
I'm Laurie Loss.
And I don't know whether to call this Week 10 or Playoff Week 2 or Football Palooza Part Dos. I don't know.
You know, I'm so confused. I was just arguing with Mick a few minutes ago about one team that lost yesterday, but they were playing today, and how we had it wrong, and I had the two teams confused.
You look exhausted right now, actually.
This is like this is like day 8 of like a 15-day straight coverage, high schools, yeah.
But you love it. You live for this.
I do, but you know, I think I need to sit on the bench. I need to sit one out at some point.
Well, you can't sit out this show because
no.
You've got all the information ready to go as we talk about all the high school football action across the South Coast. And of course, you can always get a hold of us by tweeting us at SC_varsity, by liking us on Facebook, SouthCoastVarsity.com on Facebook, and also you've got the Vine account going.
Yep.
And you had some pretty good tweets this week about hot chocolate.
You know, I didn't get any hot chocolate at the game. I did go to Dunkin' Donuts afterwards. See, this is Dunkin'.
So
can we sell an ad for Dunkin'
Donuts if you'd like to become a sponsor of South Coast EndZone.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you at least, just give us a coffee every week before the show.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Fine.
Yeah.
We promise a much livelier show. But we do have a lively show for you this week because a lot of stuff happened and a lot of stuff will be taking place this week. So let's kick it off with Laurie's first and goal.
Okay, first and goal. On first down, Darian Dumont broke free for a 50-yard touchdown scamper for Old Rochester. Second down, Matt Michael notched a pair of touchdowns to go along with 75 rushing yards for Apponequet. Third down, Weston Cohen led Apponequet past Norton with 159 yards on 17 carries and 3 touchdowns. Fourth down, Nolan Bergeron threw 2 touchdown passes and rushed for another score to keep Old Rochester undefeated. And the players of the week, Blaine Almeida connected on 9 straight passes with Nick Simonetti for 115 yards in the final 4 minutes and 32 seconds as Dartmouth rallied to beat Silver Lake. Alex Tisdale had all 3 of the Indians' touchdowns in that game. So there's the first and goal. And I had just found out today that Jordan Todman had given Dartmouth a pregame speech going into that big playoff win. And
really?
And Tisdale's mom had tweeted JT and said, "Hey, your speech motivated my son." So
did you do it like via Skype or something, or?
They had a bye. So
he was here.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm assuming
cool.
he was here.
Nice.
Like, isn't that awesome?
Awesome of him to come by to the Standard Times newsroom and say hi to me while I was stuck here.
You know, he probably didn't know you were stuck here.
That's all right. No, I'm just kidding. I was following along with that game on Twitter, and very, very exciting.
Yeah.
Which, not our Twitter because
Bill
was at the game, so there was no Twitter for us.
He was texting me, and I was trying to tweet in between tweeting.
But I was following along with the Dartmouth football Twitter feed, so.
Yeah, which they do a good job. So.
Yeah, and I was trying to retweet it so that everybody could kind of keep up.
Well, it was funny because that game and the game I was at, the New Bedford-Attleboro game, they were both they took forever. It seemed like they were never going to end. So, it was like Dartmouth was rallying, and I was getting the text messages from Bill, and then the New Bedford game ended. So then I had to go on the field and talk to Dennis Golden, and
the whole time in the back of your mind, I really want to know what happened.
Yeah. So before I even walked off the field to get to my car, I'm looking at my text messages to see what happened and see that Dartmouth did end up coming back and winning.
When somebody yells at you, "Hey, do you know what happened in that Dartmouth game?" It always happens, right? They expect us to just know everything.
And a lot of times we do.
That's because we're awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we have a lot of games to talk about this week, including 3 playoff contests. Everything is happening on Friday night this week, the way that it should be. And how do we get Old Colony to play on a Friday night?
They're on the road.
Oh, that's why. All right, well, let's start off with the playoff games. We'll start in Division 5 South. These are all semifinal games. East Bridgewater will be at Old Rochester at 7 p.m. Bulldogs looked good last week.
Yeah, I mean, they faced Seekonk for the second week in a row, and they took care of business. Nolan Bergeron, once again, had a strong game. He had 2 passing touchdowns. He also had a rushing touchdown. Richie Phillips scored a touchdown. Darian Dumont scored a touchdown. I mean, they kind of all got into it, got in the action. And they've really just proven that they don't have, just one weapon. Nolan connected with his brother Hayden for another touchdown pass. Alex Ari, he had another touchdown catch. The only thing is Ari hurt his knee during that game, so we're not exactly sure. I have to call Henry Quinlan to see if he'll be available for this week's game. But he's been a big part of the offense. I know he's caught a touchdown pass the last 2 weeks. So, I think all season we've kind of said, Old Rochester running team, and now the last few weeks, Nolan Bergeron, he's thrown 5 touchdown passes in 2 weeks. I mean, that opens things up for your whole offense when you can do that.
And it also makes it so that teams have been preparing for you all season, and now you're throwing in this new wrinkle. So.
Yeah. And the thing too is he's not throwing a lot of passes. Like I think he had 4 attempts, he completed 3, 2 were for touchdowns this past week. And I know we talk about Old Rochester being a running team. They had 238 rushing yards, and 236 of those were by Nolan Bergeron, Richie Phillips, and Darian Dumont. Those 3 guys accounted for all but 2 of their rushing yards. So. They have a good core there.
So how do they stack up against a team like East Bridgewater?
Well, East Bridgewater has actually won 4 of its last 5 games. They won last week against Rockland, 20-6. And Ryan Graham, he's thrown a touchdown pass and he rushed for 4 more. While Owen Barrington leads East Bridgewater with 8 touchdowns in the season. So they have a couple different guys that can get it done. James Shea has a couple touchdown catches, and he's run for a couple more. So they don't. It's kind of all spread out. Like they have 4 or 5 different guys, kind of similar to Old Rochester, that can kind of get the job done. They're averaging 26 points per game, so they're putting up some good numbers. And they've only been held under double digits once this season, and that was in a 36-7 loss to Abington. So it's gonna be a good game. I mean, it should be. I don't know if I want to say evenly matched, but I mean...
It might be a high scoring game.
Yeah, it should be, depending on how... Old Rochester's defense has come to play the last couple weeks. I know I had a bunch of interceptions 2 weeks ago and a couple turnovers last week. So, it should be an exciting game. And it's at Old Rochester. They're home again, which when you get the top seed, that's the best part about it is you get all these home games. You keep winning.
Absolutely. You can go to the Dunkin' Donuts right down the street from Old Rochester after the game and get a hot chocolate.
If they run out of hot chocolate, which they did when I went a couple weeks ago.
Bill Tilden would never let you not have a hot chocolate ever again. He will personally mix that for you.
Yeah. You know what? Next time I think I go to a game, I should just bring the packet and be like, "Do you have any hot water?"
And they'll be like, "No, we just ran out."
We ran out of hot water.
So that is Division 5 Southeast Bridgewater at Old Rochester, 7 p.m. on Friday. Division 3 Southeast. The semifinals, Dartmouth at Plymouth South at 7 p.m. and it's not that far of a drive from Dartmouth to Plymouth South. It takes a little maneuvering, but I got a feeling there'll be a lot of Indians fans.
Yep.
And the Indians will attack Plymouth once more.
It's that's a pretty good one.
Thank you.
When Bill was texting me the scores, and it's the first half there wasn't much scoring. It was 3-0. And Dartmouth wasn't doing anything, on offense, and then, he's sending me another score, and then it's they're down 17-6, and I'm I thought things were going to get going. I know they've had some injuries, Dartmouth, but, I just had a feeling they were going to win this week, and the next thing you know, it's Nick Simonetti, gets out there, and we've kind of been waiting for him to have a breakout season. I know he's had, some strong games in previous years. He's a senior now, he's one of the top kids on the team, and he hasn't really had one of those superstar games, and this is it. Blaine Almeida and him, they connected 9 times in the last 4 minutes, 115 yards. Alex Tisdale had all 3 touchdowns, and he's kind of taken over since Connor Tavares has been injured. They've had some injuries. Chris Martin went out. So, the backfield for Dartmouth has really been banged up all season, and now somebody who maybe wouldn't even play that much in this game, kid like Alex, can come in and score 3 touchdowns. That just shows kind of the depth of this Dartmouth team to be able to do that and do that in the playoffs. This is the time where you want to keep playing. You want to win, and you want to, even if you're on the road, you don't really. Somebody was saying to me the other day, well, the only way we'll get a home game now is if we lose.
Right.
Which if you're in the playoffs, you don't want to get that home game unless you're Old Rochester.
Absolutely.
But Plymouth South has been led by Dylan Oxen. He's scored 18 touchdowns this season.
That's quite a few.
Yeah, 17 of them came on the ground. 1 was an interception return for a touchdown. So he is the focal point of Dartmouth's
Yes.
our defense this week. Plymouth South's lone loss this year came against Dennis Yarmouth, 31-12. The Panthers have outscored their competition 170-79, with 3 games of 25 points or more. In last week's win over Sharon, Oxton scored 4 of Plymouth South's 5 touchdowns. So, I mean, this is a kid that can find the end zone. So Dartmouth is going to have to focus on stopping him or limiting him, to get the win at Plymouth South. So
I have some familiarity with the Plymouth South program, and they're always fast teams.
Yep.
And always physical teams. So
yeah,
which will match up well with Dartmouth because they're similar.
Yeah, and it's interesting that their only loss came to Dennis Yarmouth because we're talking about D3 right here. Dartmouth against Plymouth South, but Dennis Yarmouth is Apponequet's opponent in Division 4 South, which will be getting.
Dennis Yarmouth also plays a lot of Division 1 teams.
Yeah.
Like New Bedford.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting to see, some of these teams of who they play. Like, because, when I get ready for the show, I kind of look in and see the schedule and see, okay, well, who played who and who, how did everybody do? And, I think Apponequet's going to be in for a tough challenge this week, against the Dennis Yarmouth team that has really enjoyed, like, a balanced attack this year. They've gotten it done on both sides of the ball. Quarterback Spencer Tyler, he's thrown 16 touchdown passes. He's also rushed for 4 more. They have this kid Corey DeSimone and Mike Dunn. They've each scored 10 touchdowns this season. I mean, I know Apponequet's offense has been awesome. They've been, running the ball through, around, over everybody. But I think they're going to face a tough challenge against Dennis Yarmouth. They've scored 40 or more points the last 4 weeks, DY. And the 2 losses came to Plymouth North and Nauset. But they've won 5 straight games right now going into this game.
I'm also very proud of you.
Why?
That was your first segue, I think.
Was it? You like
segued
that?
right from one game into the next.
Tim, you're
I'm
rubbing off
on
on
it.
me. You are. You really are. But like we've been talking every week, Apponequet. We have Wes Cohen, we have Matt Michael, we have Troy Nanfelt, we have Cam Costa. I mean, pick and choose. Who's going to get the ball? I mean, they all can pick up yards.
You're not going to stop them all.
Yeah, you can't stop them all, and that's what makes them so dangerous. I mean, this past week, those 4 guys they combined for 397 yards. Like that's some teams don't even get that many yards
for the whole team.
Yeah, or even for 2 games. There's some teams that only have 200 yards for a game. But last week Cohen.
We'll talk about some of those teams later on.
Yeah, Cohen, led him with like 159 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. Michael had a pair of touchdowns. So they're having multiple guys that are getting into the end zone, and I think having that balanced attack and with having so many guys that are so solid and good, nobody's getting tired. Okay, Wes Cohen's in there for 3 straight plays. Get him out. Put Matt Michael in. It's just they don't fall off.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like people, they hear all these names and they think they're all on the field at one time, but they don't have to be.
No, they don't have to be.
They don't need to be.
And that can keep them fresh. And Apponequet has outscored the opposition this year, 339-90.
Yeah, that's a pretty big margin of victory there.
And they've scored 40 or more points 6 times.
Well, they probably will not score 40 or more points this week.
Probably not against Dennis Yarmouth.
But I think they get the win.
I think this game's going to be a shootout.
Yeah.
I really do. I feel like both offenses they have so many different weapons that, it could be the team with the ball at the end, wins.
Last one in wins.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go over the playoff games again real quickly for you. Division 5 South, East Bridgewater at Old Rochester at 7 p.m. on Friday. Division 3 Southeast, Dartmouth at Plymouth South, 7 p.m. on Friday. And Division 4 South, Apponequet at Dennis Yarmouth, 6 p.m. on Friday. So all you Lakers fans, you get to make sure you leave a little bit early and account for the bridge, too, because you're going to have to be crossing the bridge at a tough time. I know it's not tourist season anymore, but it's still hard.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Plus, with the time change, I mean, I left New Bedford High today from the volleyball match and walked outside and it was pitch black. I'm like, wow, daylight savings is over.
Yeah, it got dark quick.
Yeah.
So now let's go into the non-playoff games, but we still have quite a few games happening. And again, these are all on Friday. We'll start off with Martha's Vineyard at Fairhaven, 6 p.m. And I mean, this is a game that normally we would circle as being a pretty good game for both teams.
Yeah,
if it was, despite being in the non-playoff bracket.
Yeah, well, I talked to to Scott Francis last week, and he said he wasn't sure if Fairhaven had ever played Martha's Vineyard, because he used to be the coach before Rudy. But he said, we've seen other EAC opponents.
They've never played. I remember Martha's Vineyard used to always play SEC teams, I thought.
Yeah, but he doesn't think that
they never did?
Yeah, that they've ever played. So it should be interesting to see kind of how Fairhaven, a team that kind of finished in the middle of the SEC, goes up against a team like Martha's Vineyard that finished kind of in the middle of the EAC. They got wins over Bishop Stang and Coyle, but then they lost to Somerset Berkeley and Bishop Feehan this year. It's kind of been an up and down season for Martha's Vineyard. Besides their 3 wins in their other 5 games, they've been outscored a combined 144 to 55, and they were shut out twice, once to Bedford and once to Somerset Berkeley. So this is a team that's had struggles offensively. Quarterback Mike Mussel, he has 6 touchdown passes this season, and Joe Turney has 4 rushing touchdowns to go along with 2 receiving. So those are the kind of the focal points on offense for the Vineyard. And last week, Fairhaven, they played Archbishop Williams, and they got into a huge hole early. They fell behind 27-0 in the first half. They did score 20 points in that second half, but it was just too little, too late on the road. In the sometimes even if you rally, it's a valiant effort, but at the same time, you have too big of a hole.
Right.
Cross Nagalia had a huge touchdown run, 60 yards. Ian Furtado returned an interception, 40 yards for a score, and then Cam Costas scored on a one-yard quarterback keeper. So they accounted for the offense last week. But I see Fairhaven, back home, coming out strong to start this game, and there's no way they're going to fall behind early like they did last week.
Well, I talked to Rudy after that game, and he said that he could tell in the second half they just wanted it more than they did in the first.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that kind of attitude follows through.
Yeah.
And now everybody likes to, everybody wishes they were the playoff team.
Yeah.
But now this is your playoffs.
Yeah, it really is.
So why not try to run the table the rest of the way if you can?
Yeah, and two, they have a pretty young team. A lot of these kids are going to be returning, so why not get that experience in there? Facing some of these teams you don't normally see. I mean, that can just bode well. Plus, I think we're starting to see how some of our conference teams are stacking up against other conferences. Because sometimes
the MIA will tell you that was the plan they had in mind all along.
Yeah, which I don't know if it's necessarily good all the time. When you see some of the scores, but at the same time, they think it's an even playing field. So.
All right, so that is Martha's Vineyard at Fairhaven at 6 p.m. on Friday. That's because of the boat,
Yep.
Also, but it'll still be dark, plenty dark enough to play under the lights. Dover Sherborne at Greater New Bedford Voc Tech at 7 p.m. on Friday, and the Bears, last week they had their first ever MIAA playoff appearance.
Yep.
And after the game, Chuck Allaire was pretty impressed with how his team kind of hung with them.
Yeah, it was pretty. The final score doesn't show that 20-0 was the loss for Voc Tech, but it was pretty evenly matched. There was a couple goal line stands for Voc Tech, against Abington. They did some really good things. They just couldn't get in the end zone.
Right.
Their offense stalled multiple times. They fell behind. In that first half, they were down. It was 20-0.
They stalled the 9, I think.
Yeah, it was inside the 10. I know they saw, and but really the Green Wave, their offense wasn't that great either. Mm-hmm. They had a punt return for a touchdown, an interception return for a touchdown, and then they did have a TD pass. So really, Voc Tech gave up 1 touchdown. Their defense gave up 1 touchdown. You can't really that's not bad. But you have to turn around and you have to be able to score. You have to keep these drives alive. I know Sean Aldridge had a couple big runs. Nick Richard had a couple passes, but they couldn't really string anything together, to go the distance in that game. And really, they're facing a Dover Sherborne team that's coming off a big loss to Cardinal Spellman. And DS has lost 4 of its last 5 games after opening the season 3-0. So this is a team that's struggling. I see Voc Tech going out there, the Bears establishing themselves early on their home turf, and getting a good jump on Dover Sherborne.
So it's where some of these teams are playing, like Voc Tech was a playoff team and now they're not.
Yep.
So is Dover Sherborne then? Were they a playoff team and now they're not? So is that kind of how they're trying to rank them?
Well, it's when they have they have this thing on the MIA website, and it's like the loser of this game faces the loser of that game down here, and then the winner of those games face the winner, like the winners of the two games face each other for the play. You know what I mean? Like,
so it's not like a team that didn't make the playoffs all of a sudden has to play playoff loser.
You know, I don't know if that happens next round because, you know, once these, you know what I mean? Because we're already, like, you know, teams will be removed. Like a team that made the playoffs and lost in the first round, they'll be removed 2 weeks from the playoffs by next week. So you'll have to stay tuned for next week's End Zone to find out the answer to that.
Well, our next game is Old Colony at Monomoy Regional. That's 6 p.m. on Friday. I said that right, Monomoy?
Monomoy, yeah, I think that's...
So, that... I don't know anything about Monomoy, so I hope that you do.
Well, you know, didn't one of our soccer teams play Monomoy?
I think
New Bedford
the
or
name
both.
pops up quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like it's a team that we always see like in the playoffs, and we're like, Monomoy. Where the heck is that? You know, it's one of those.
It's like The Simpsons. We're all here. Monomoy. Monomoy.
Well, Monomoy has lost 6 straight games, including back-to-back losses to Hull. And over the last 2 weeks against Hull, they've been outscored 70-26. Monomoy has scored 20 or more points just 3 times this season and been held under double digits also 3 times. So it's really a team that has kind of not really got much going this season. And Old Colony, you know, even though it's been a little bit of an up and down season, you know, the Cougars have had some really good games. You know, they've had some great performances, like from Jake Pringle,
right.
Cole Bernier. You know, a few weeks ago we were talking about him, you know, lifting them, you know, in that game. But last week against Carver, they really just struggled stopping the rushing attack of the Crusaders. You know, they allowed the Crusaders to rack up almost 300 rushing yards. I mean, when you're having a team do that against you, you know, it's pretty tough to get your offense going. Seth Moniz had their lone touchdown last week on a 5-yard run, and that tied the score at 8 in the second quarter. But then Carver went on to score 30 unanswered points. So it got pretty ugly for the Cougars in the second half. They didn't register a first down. So hopefully the Cougars can turn it around this week against a Monomoy team that, you know, has been struggling itself. So
that is Old Colony at Monomoy, 6 p.m. Where is Monomoy?
You know, I think it's past Boston. Like, I think it's like east or north or northeast or...
Have fun, Bill. Foxborough at Wareham, 7 p.m. And the Vikings get to play at home.
Yep.
So there's that.
Yeah, they get to play at home.
That's kind of all I have for them, though, because usually Foxborough is a pretty good team.
Yeah, Foxborough's coming off of a 41-28 win over Middleborough. And Middleborough seems to be one of those teams that you kind of look at and, you know, like in previous years, I know at Aponequid, you always used to like open the season against them.
They're like a measuring stick type team for the area.
Yeah. So, you know, to say Foxborough, you know, had a big win over Middleborough last week, which I'm pretty sure Wareham is playing next week, if I remember the schedule right. But
that sounds right.
I could be completely wrong because my brain is a bunch of mush right now. But anyway, in last week's win over Middleborough, Nolan Rogers threw 3 touchdown passes for Foxborough. 2 of them went to Tim O'Haram, and Foxborough has scored 190 points in its 8 games while giving up an average of 16 points. So they're a team that you know, pretty solid on both sides of the ball. You know, it's not gaudy numbers one way or the other. But Wareham just last week it was ugly. You know, against Medway, they lost 48-0. They struggled to keep, you know, drives alive. They punted the ball 5 times, turned over the ball on downs. I think it was at least 3 or 4 times. They were shut out for the first time this season. The ground attack did, I think, get about 160 rushing yards. That's what Dan Nault said. But it sounded like it, you know, Medway just came to, you know, kind of took it to them and never really let up. You know, in that game. So it's going to be important for Wareham to come out this game. And, you know, they're at home. You know, I think, are they playing at Bourne on Thanksgiving?
This year, I believe it is at Bourne.
So this is going to be their last home game of the season. So why not come out and give the home crowd, you know, something to root for and, you know, try and get ahead early. But it's not going to be easy against, you know, a solid Foxborough team.
All right, our next game is Newton North at New Bedford, 7 p.m. on Friday. And I don't know that much about Newton North either. Well, that's going to happen with a lot of these teams. Newton
North won, kind of similar to New Bedford. They won their last 2 games to make the tournament. You know, I mean, I know we were kind of talking about New Bedford had beat Dartmouth and upset, Brockton to make the tournament. That's what kind of Newton did to get in. But they fell to BR in the first round big. It was a very similar score, 41-7. They lost to Bridgewater Raynham. New Bedford lost 42-7 to Attleboro. So now the two losers from those first two games, now they're going head to head. And Newton North is averaging 18 points per game while giving up an average of 19. So it's kind of been, they've had some games where they've been able to score points, and then they have some games where they haven't been able to stop teams from scoring points. Their record's actually 4-4 overall. Quarterback Jake Butcher has has 5 touchdown passes this season. He's also rushed for 4 touchdowns, and earlier this season he caught 2 touchdown passes. So he's kind of been like an all-purpose player for them this year. And really, last week I was at that New Bedford Attleboro game, and just penalties and turnovers cost New Bedford in that game. I know the Whalers came out that first drive, the opening drive of the game, and they just drove down the field, and they got, I can't remember if it was like the 10-yard line or 8-yard line, and they ended up turning over the ball. And once they did that, it just seemed like the momentum went against them. Attleboro got a couple touchdowns. They had a couple other penalties where, a nice screen pass for 40 yards gets called back for a holding. I know Kevin Nunes had a big interception in the end zone on the quarterback from Attleboro last week. Right before the half, they would have gone down 21-0. It was only 14-0, but in the second half, just more turnovers, and New Bedford just couldn't dig out of that hole. I know Jonathan Morales, he had the lone touchdown on a 14-yard run for New Bedford. He has 4 touchdown runs this year, as does Hector Diaz. So those are the 2 guys in the rushing attack. And I know this past week, they started with Chandler DeBras, which it's kind of every week we're not sure who they're going to start with. Are they going to play a whole game with one quarterback? Are they going to switch him in? They started with him. He was getting things going, and then Attleboro changed his defense a little bit, started picking him up because he was carrying the ball. He I think on that first drive he had like 6 runs and got, and picked up 40 or 50 yards. So he was getting them down the field. But then once they made a couple adjustments, the lanes weren't really open, so they brought in Brendan Costa, and they kind of switched between the two the rest of the game. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this week.
Sure. So it'll be Newton North at New Bedford, 7 p.m. on Friday. And also our final game, also 7 p.m. on Friday, Situate at Bishop Stang.
Yeah, and Bishop Stang is coming off a 40-8 loss to Westwood. I know it was exciting for the Spartans to make the playoffs.
But it was a tough draw for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more difficult than that. Last year they had just 1 win. This year, they kind of go on a nice little run with the defense. They have a chance to win, or compete for the EAC title. They fall short. They finish second. They get the playoff berth, and then they have to go up to Westwood, and they fell behind 20-0 after the first quarter, 40-0 at halftime. That's a huge hole for any team to dig out of, especially you're on the road.
A team that's been more about defense than offense as the offense has been coming together.
Yeah, it's not like you don't expect Bishop Stang to go into a game and put up 40 points. You expect them to put up maybe 14, maybe 20. Depending on the game. And really, the lone touchdown came from Mike Tucker in the third quarter. The Spartans had got beat on a couple big plays in that game, and they had trouble getting their own offense going. So I think the focal point this week is don't give up the big play, and let's move the chains. Let's keep, I think we've been they've had a strong defense. I can't remember how many games in a row that they kept teams under double digits, but it was like maybe 4 games. But a lot of that was the defense playing strong, but also the offense was able to just grind out the clock. And they have to be able to grind. They're not going to be flashy and make some huge plays. They're just going to grind you down. Mm-hmm. So that's what they need to get back to doing. And Situate, is a pretty good team. They were on a 6-game winning streak until last week when they lost to Holliston. Situate's averaging 36 points per game. Wow. While giving up an average of 25. So they are giving up some points, but they can put points on the board. Mm-hmm. So, and in last week's loss to Holliston, Christian Brady, he threw 2 touchdown passes and rushed for another 2. So that's.
I want to guess that he wears number 12.
He might.
I'm just gonna guess.
He might. I don't know. We'll have to see when we get the roster. See if he does. But he's going to be the focal point for that Bishop Stang defense. But it looks like they make the playoffs, which is awesome, great. But it's a tough road for them. Mm-hmm. So.
All right, so we'll go down the list one more time. The playoff games: Division 5 South, East Bridgewater. These games are all Friday. East Bridgewater at Old Rochester, 7 p.m. Division 3 Southeast, Dartmouth at Plymouth South, 7 p.m. Division 4 South, Apponequet at Dennis Yarmouth, 6 p.m. And then the non-playoff games: Martha's Vineyard at Fairhaven, 6 p.m. Dover Sherborne at Greater New Bedford Voc Tech, 7 p.m. Old Colony at Monomoy Regional, 6 p.m. Foxborough at Wareham, 7 p.m. Newton North at New Bedford, 7 p.m. And Situate at Bishop Stang, 7 p.m. So we want everybody to tweet us all your pictures and all the things that are happening at all these games at SC_varsity. Also like us on Facebook, SouthCoastVarsity.com on Facebook, and follow us on Vine at South Coast Varsity?
I think so.
Okay. So there you go. Instagram, coming soon. You Instagram pictures to us, and we'll make sure we get them out there.
Yeah.
All right. So then until next week, we'll see you under the lights.
And in the end zone.